Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, this is Redberry Wheel here, and welcome back to another Civil Air Patrol video. In today's video, I'm going to go over something from emergency services in the GTM3, or the Ground Team Member 3, F&P, or Familiarization and Preparatory Training. And the F&P is required before you go out in the field and you actively do the practical applications of your knowledge. So today's video is primarily talking about hot weather injuries, treating them, and preventing them. So right now it's summer, and I think it's pretty appropriate to be able to talk about hot weather injuries. So let's go ahead and start talking about it. So one of the suggestions that we have for drinking water is that we drink 2 quarts of water at least per day. But if it's a hot summer day, it can be as high as 6 to 8 quarts per day. And that's a lot of water. So when you are outside and you are actively in the field, that means you need to be frequently drinking. And one of the ways that we can make sure we are frequently drinking is by having constant reminders, reminding each other to drink water, because it's not just the leader's responsibility. So by having a wingman and keeping each other accountable and being like, hey, have you been drinking water? And just making sure that everyone is properly hydrated individual, then that will definitely help with being effective for carrying out the mission. Because if someone is dehydrated, then they can be pretty ineffective and actually become part of the mission instead of supporting the mission. So make sure you do not become a patient by taking care of yourself and taking care of your team members. Another thing to keep in mind is that when you go to the bathroom, you should look at the color of the water. Because if you are super dehydrated, then it can start to change color, or it can appear to be much darker than it normally should be. Now, because you are drinking water outside, and you may be going to the bathroom outside, it might be harder to evaluate. But if you can, then it's good to check to make sure that it is a light yellow color and not a dark brown or dark yellow color. That is just something to keep in mind, that it's a way that you can evaluate yourself while you are out in the field. Another part of it is you want to make sure that you are taking frequent breaks when you are out and about in the field. So if you are starting to feel tired, or your legs are really hurting, or you start to get some kind of headache, you need to communicate that with your team members. Because if you are quiet about it, then that can become a bigger issue later on. And we want to mitigate any potential areas that could result in injury to ourselves or our team members. So if you start feeling really tired, just say something. You guys can take a break, maybe sit down on a local log and relax a little bit before moving on, because we want to make sure everyone is set and ready to go. There's also sunburns. The sun likes to soak up the energy from you. It doesn't exactly work like that, but the sun can create a lot of exhaustion just because of the UV rays, and they can be draining. So when I'm doing emergency services, I'm always wearing my cover. I'm always wearing my long sleeves down, and I'm wearing my boots and my pants and everything in uniform still, wearing my gloves, but I'm also making sure that I'm wearing the proper number of layers, because if I were wearing too many layers, then I could get way too hot, which is why it's good to have several layers. And if it's cold outside, then you can wear underneath your uniform, maybe some Under Armour or some kind of long underwear. And if it's hotter out, then just wearing that t-shirt undershirt underneath your blouse should be okay. And additionally, using sunscreen on those exposed parts of your arms and your face should help you reduce potential heat exhaustion. So there are 3 different types of heat-related injuries. There is heat cramps, heat exhaustion, and heat strokes. And that is kind of like the progression between each of the levels, each one becoming more and more intense. Heat heat cramps are the most common, and typically if you're exercising really heavily, you might feel abdominal cramping right here, or your legs might feel a little cramped up. If that's the case, then start to drink a little bit more water. Sit down, relax in a cool shaded area. Make sure that you're not overheating, so if you need to, you could always de-blouse, because just by having that blouse on, it might be retaining some extra heat, maybe even taking your cover off and cooling yourself down that way. There's also giving someone salted water or Gatorade to restore electrolytes to help alleviate the symptoms. If you have some kind of damp, cool towel, and then you could always put that on their forehead or on the back of their neck to reduce that heat. And normally, if you're hot, then the most heated areas are underneath your armpits and behind your knees. So with cold weather injuries, I'm going to mention this again. In cold weather injuries, you want to put your extremities underneath your knees, behind your knees, or underneath your armpits when you're warming them up, because those are where your core temperature is. So if you can fan off and kind of cool those areas off too, that can be very helpful for cooling someone down. And if you are trying to help with the cramping, you could always also apply pressure to it. Normally I would not touch other people right now because of COVID stuff. So if you have cramps, if you apply that light pressure to it, as long as it's not super duper uncomfortable, that might also help alleviate that cramping that you're experiencing. So then the next level is heat exhaustion. So that's the next step forward towards badness. So a few different symptoms associated with heat exhaustion are rapid and shallow breathing, clamminess in the skin. They might feel a little weak or dizzy, potentially even getting close to the loss of consciousness. There's also heavy perspiration because they're just so hot and their body is trying to reduce that heat, and the way the body does that is through sweat. So just move that person to a shady area, let them lay down, let them cool off. If you've got that cool towel that's wet, go ahead, use that. Make sure they're drinking water. You can fan the person, fan their armpits, fan their face. Sometimes this happens at encampment and people have clipboards too, so using some kind of clipboard can also be used as a good fan. If they are conscious still, make sure that you're trying to restore those electrolytes, or give them that sodium water, or the salted water, I should say, just so that they can start to replenish that lost sodium in their body, because with sweat, there's a lot of loss of salt in the body, in addition to just making sure that the balance is regained within them. In terms of symptoms for heat stroke, there is a slowing and deeper breathing, and it's shallower than before. So before it was rapid, and now it's slowing down. It's progressively becoming less and less oxygen getting through their body. Instead of the skin being sweaty, they will feel dry and hot. In addition to that, the pupils will be dilated, and they could potentially be experiencing seizures, unconsciousness, and muscle spasms or twitching. So if someone is doing that, you need to remove any potential sources of heat and clothing, just so that they can cool down, because the main objective is to cool the person down. And if you have cool water available to bathe them in, then that can definitely be useful, except make sure it's not super duper cold, because if it's super duper cold, that can induce shock. So make sure it's cooler but not too cold. And the use of ice packs underneath, under the neck, in the armpits, behind the knees, that can also work, because as I mentioned, those are the heat centers of the body. and they should be taken to a medical facility immediately, if at all possible, because that stroke can lead to death. So that is just something to be aware of. If you are ever experiencing like that lightheadedness or weakness, if you stop sweating, that is a problem, especially if you're out in the field. So please make sure you're drinking plenty of water and you're looking after your wingmen. So that is all I'm going to say for heat-related injuries. If you do have any questions for me, please feel free to leave them in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and that is all, folks. Until next time, doodles.